So today we have Vanessa with Divorcing Adults PLLC out of North Carolina. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking with me. And
You're welcome.
so first, what can you tell me about your time in the military? What did you do, and what was your favorite duty station, or what did you love most about your time in the service?
Well, I didn't love really anything about it, honestly. It wasn't a great experience at all. The best part was when it was over. And I've just tried to kind of move on and away from that as much as possible, but haven't been able to because I made the mistake of marrying into the military unwittingly. I didn't really intend to do that. I thought my husband would be kind of getting out.
Oh no.
And he didn't. I didn't really get that, like, that this was, like, a long-term thing, that this was gonna be in my life, and so I've never really gotten fully away from that whole situation, to say the least, but I have definitely distanced myself successfully to as much as possible. As far as my time in the military, I think the best way to give you context and perspective is the fact that, I now realize at the ripe old age of 38, that, just a lot of background and context. And that was that the reason I ended up joining the military, because, there's a tiny percentage of people in the US that do, and an even tinier percentage of women that do, is because I was born into a military family. My mother was in the military in three different branches for like 15 years. Most of that time was before I was born because she had me later in life, around 30. Um, and I had multiple relatives that were in various branches of the military in various capacities through the decades and generations. And so for me, that was a very normalized, it's like a option and career path in a way that is not the case for most other people. It's not even a thought. And so that's really how the path formed. Plus, I live nearby a military base, not as large as like, Fort Liberty, formerly known as Fort Bragg, North Carolina here where I'm at. Um, but certainly it was a military base that did have a presence that was felt throughout the entire community and always possible. And so that's another influencing factor. Because like 80% of people who join the military come from military families. And then there's a percentage where you're more likely to join if you have a military base in your community. So I was like, check on both of those. So yeah, I was like 19 when I first joined, and then I was in a couple of different branches. I was in my late 20s by the time I finished up the active duty stuff. And then you have that little individual ready reserve, whatever they call IRR in your contract, which for me meant nothing because it was never activated or anything. Um, and so my time in the military, there was just a lot of abuse of power, quite frankly, when I was in. It was very unpleasant, grueling experience that was just a matter of endurance. I met some really great people in the military, some of the best people I've ever met in my life. And then I met some of those evil people I've ever met in my life as well. And so, there was no system when I was in, I don't care what they say, that was actually being utilized to deal with people that were super predators going from location to location, creating countless victims, or abusing the power. It was just so easy to do because of the rigid hierarchy and rank structure, and excusing just horrific, morally bankrupt behavior, and that you couldn't get away from. You couldn't quit your job. So that was pretty much my experience in a nutshell. As far as what I did for work, my occupation was essentially would be considered a civilian equivalent of a health inspector. It was considered 68 SERA preventive medicine specialist. Um, and that was just an occupation just for the military. It did not translate at all into the civilian world. I saw someone make a uninformed comment on an interview I did related to this topic uh, online somewhere else. And it would just make me kind of chuckle because they're like, oh, that is a job that is like you could walk into something else. And it's like, no, it's not. And they were giving an example of like, well, you could get like, I did not interact with this person either. I just read their comment. I thought it was ridiculous. And it said something like, you could get, it was on someone else's platform where they posted this video that I done a different interview. You could get like a public health degree. And it's like, okay, that is not this, like, that's not like walking into something. Like that is like a whole nother thing. And I actually do have a public health degree, and I actually did get that when I was active duty through tuition assistance. And like, honestly, didn't like do anything for me, set me up, benefit me at all. Like I would have been much better by studying like law and real estate.
Yeah.
Like that would have been the better things to study, right? And also, I feel like I'm dating myself here, but like online education has advanced so much from back then when I was in the military, which back when I was in the military, and I was like, that's how I finished my degrees. And it was great opportunity to be able to do that. But at the same time, well, my social work one was done mostly in person at a state school after I got out. But back then it was like the options for online education were so limited compared to now. There's so many degrees exist now that never existed then, which are it's amazing. That's awesome on every topic known to mankind. But also it was like a joke. It was like there was still a stigma attached with going to do anything online,
Mhm.
and now I think that stigma has largely been removed because all these schools, big name schools alike, are doing stuff online now. So it's just a different world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing that, technology, I don't know. I know you're a little bit younger than I am. When I had gotten out of, or I guess when I was in high school, the pagers had just come out. So things have
Those things
changed.
are annoying.
Oh yeah, they are. They are. Like I'm glad that those died pretty quickly. I mean, I guess maybe doctors still use them. I'm not really sure.
I
But
don't know.
well, awesome. So well, first of all, what can you tell me about Divorcing Adults PLLC?
Yeah, she gets called Divorcing Adults. You don't have to keep mentioning the structure thing. It's fine.
Yeah.
So basically, it was born out of the fact that I had about 10 years social work experience, approximately. And I ended up, and the work I ended up doing, I never really anticipated doing. You just don't know sometimes. And so, what I learned and what's become a really big focus of mine is I've learned a lot about how many people in America have legal problems of different kinds. And I mean all kinds, not just criminal, not just family court, not just civil. It could be any of the one of the three or a mixture, right? And so I'm really convinced that most people in America are going to end up having a legal problem at some point in their life, whether they can even identify that's legal problem or not. And so right out the gate, I was working with people that had all kinds of different legal problems. I worked with people that were like convicted felons that were had legal problems in the criminal system, and it impacted their ability to kind of like get housing, and saw how kind of tricky that was. I worked with people heavily starting in like 2000, and I think it was 17, that were involved in the family court system and court ordered for some kind of like mental health treatment, whether it be addiction or anger management or something along those lines. And some of those people would have criminal issues too because of domestic violence, abuse, stuff with family court, and just a real mixture of stuff. And I got to really see through my clients' eyes kind of some of their experiences and kind of what it was like, and see how backed up the family court system is throughout the country. I also did family and small claims court mediation briefly for a couple years. In Florida where I'm from online. So I learned more of that from that lens as well. And then I decided to return to private practice this year, 2024, because of just my experience and really passion around these topics. Basically, it's a perpetual interest to me. You know what I mean? Because about half of Americans are going to get a divorce, and what people don't realize, most people, when they get married, is how easy it is to get married in America and how hard it tends to be to get a divorce. And what may or may not be involved from person to person is highly individualized. Most people don't get the support that they need when they're going through that life transition. They rely upon the wrong people for kind of emotional support, like attorneys who are going to charge them like no other, or in some cases get taken advantage of. There's a lot with that topic. Don't even know, it's a real touchy topic to say the least. There's a lot there. There's a lot of terrible things that happen, abuses that happen to people going through the legal system in general in America, and especially the family court legal system. And so that's why I was motivated to kind of pursue this kind of very seemingly niche area, because you see, if you really do your research, and I'm definitely in the industry, I've seen it, a lot of people focusing on couples counseling. right? And restoring your marriage or affair recovery. You don't see a lot of people focusing on when you've decided you don't want to do that anymore and you'll need to move on. You know what I mean? And help with that. Because there's a lot with that goes on with co-parenting and with domestic abuse and with the stress and the strain and of going through trying to go through the family court system, which could be any number of things. You may not even go to court, you may just file paperwork or see a mediator or whatever. And so that is how that kind of came about.
Yes. That's, I mean, there are so many different situations that it's one answer isn't the right one for everyone. Um,
Hmm.
and when the system's not necessarily tailored for those individual needs, that's awesome that you offer these services to help with that. So, how did you come up with the idea to, well, I so many questions. So you had
Fire away. Fire away.
started
I
in
can if you have 20 questions, I can do 20. I can just time me and we can be like, time's up, next question, 10 seconds, let's go.
I love it. So so you started out in Florida. What how did you end up in North Carolina, or what made you decide to do this in North Carolina?
So I grew up in Florida. So I was from like a resident of Florida from the time I was 3 years old up until very recently.
Okay.
And I joined, the only reason I left Florida is because I joined the military. And then I stayed gone because of the military situation, the family situation with all of that. And so that's why. So like I was like I did the mediation there because I thought I was gonna move back there. It's kind of what I was thinking. And then that like not happening. And so that's what I was doing, kind of like online mediation that way, through their court system. And then ended up, it's kind of a long story, but I ended up getting licensed originally, fully licensed at the highest level to practice in social work in North Carolina to begin
Okay.
with. So like I've always had this license. Now I did try to get my license. I was actually just talking about this in a different video today. Recognized in other states when I moved because of the military family situation or because of my career, whatever. And just God help you with all that, just getting your license recognized. I mean, it's literally, it varies state to state, but typically it's like it's very expensive. Typically, I've seen it to go into thousands of dollars in fees, months, if not years, to try to get your license, over in the other state. Just so much red tape. It's just really out of control. So, anyways, so yeah, that's the situation with that. But as far as North Carolina, I was really a military. I only came here because of the military situation. That's it. I never even thought of living here for even a moment outside of that. And I'm actually have a move on the horizon to permanently leave North Carolina. So of course looking at licensing again in another state. And it's just like I was just talking about this in another video, like some of these requirements are just like ludicrous. Like I'm just like knowing where they come up with this stuff. It's like they're literally just trying to keep people from getting licensed in their state. It's like, is this a joke? Like, what? And you almost always have to call these people or contact them, like, what are you talking about? Like, what does this even mean? How do you even comply with this? Is this even humanly possible? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's very hard, especially as a military spouse, and because you got to move
Yeah.
every couple of years sometimes. I mean, there's some people that stay at the same location their entire career, but we're not.
It varies. We're kind of in between the two, what you extremes you described. And so this move would not be because of the I mean, everything's because of the military, because otherwise we've been stabilized, right? We've been in one place. But this is more of a thing of like, don't want to live in North Carolina. I
Oh, okay.
never did. And so like just wrapping up with that military stuff and finding a permanent home elsewhere type thing. But yeah, North Carolina here due to military. That was the only reason.
Yeah. So are you able to share where you think you're headed to next?
I don't even want to, my friend when jinx it. But yeah, we have a location in mind, and this is like not the first location we've had in mind, but I mean, I feel like it's gonna happen. I think this is the one. I
Awesome.
think it is. I hope it's gonna work out.
we can always follow up later once
Yeah.
you're once everything's settled in.
Yeah, it's gonna be a minute.
So I understand your why. I'm going through my standard questions, and you did an amazing job of answering most of them without me even having to ask. So, what do you love most about what you do?
So I'd say the main thing when it comes to the social worky stuff, which I guess everything I do, even like the military kind of advocacy stuff really kind of revolves around social work and social issues and social justice, right? And stuff like that. And so the main thing with like the divorcing adult stuff or is really about I just have a really strong interest that's formed in the last several years in the American legal system due to how un- unjust it really is for so many people. Um, that it just keeps me perpetually interested. Like, regardless of the work, if I'm like actively working, like I'm constantly keeping up on these types of issues. And I'm always very interested in interpersonal relationships and that impacts family relationships and the American legal system dynamics, the way it's set up currently. And so that's probably what the number one thing is. It just keeps me interested. Like, I have a genuine interest in this. And so when I do go to work with, a person that needs help, whatever, seek my services, it's like this is like my life. This is something I'm just like really interested in. So it's not a stretch to like really kind of understand and see kind of where they're at. You know what I mean? I think it's a stretch for a lot of people. And also, a lot of people in my industry are really scared of the legal system. And honestly, I have a fear of it too at this point. I do because I feel overexposed to it. I've seen enough to really kind of become afraid because I understand about the abuse of power within the American legal system and how it's been manipulated so that certain people, like attorneys, can make a ton of cash off of it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And off the misery and pain and suffering of others. And so I've just seen that. And so, I've become a really big advocate for repeal UPL, which is unauthorized practice of law. And basically what that means is there's a lawsuit against North Carolina right now that Institute for Justice is a part of. They're representing some plaintiffs, which basically means people filing a lawsuit. And basically, they're trying to make it to so unauthorized practice of law basically focuses on not allowing non-lawyers, people that are not licensed as attorneys, to provide representation to others, or which could look like filing paperwork at a court, giving legal advice, legal consultation, et cetera, et cetera. There's a very wide definition, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm in law school. It's not legal advice. Disclaimer.
Yeah.
And there's that. And so if that were to be repealed, that would open up the floodgates of innovation and technology, I believe, to help the masses with whatever they need instead of it being as so was eloquently stated, or I'll summarize from the lawsuits, basically like legal monopoly. You can go to the Institute for Justice website to learn out more about that. And basically, monopoly being like where the prices go up, the choices go down, a group of people are able to maintain the power over the options and ultimately the money and stuff like that, and to the detriment of the public interest. And right now, the UPL, unauthorized practice of law, is common and prevalent throughout much of the United States of America. Done a whole video on this topic, actually. It's on divorcingadults.com and my website, womanmilitaryveteran.com. It's everywhere. I have it everywhere. And they're also non-lawyer owned law firms is something that needs to happen because right now lawyers are the only ones allowed to own law firms in most parts of the US.
Mhm. Okay.
And also allowing legal sandboxes because right now Utah has that, and it's just a real game changer, and it allows people to get help that need help on their own terms. So
That would be amazing. Um, so obviously a huge passion of yours. I wanted to touch really quick too because you and I had talked offline. So you also have woman military veteran. Can you tell me a little or tell us a little bit more about that and your
yeah.
passion there?
So, I've been talking for years about and trying to advocate about issues related to the military community. You mentioned military spouse licensure. And so recently the federal law was passed where military spouses in certain situations, certain licenses are able to get those licenses recognized when they move with their active duty service member. So topics like that are something that I've covered at length through the years because they're topics that affected me. Much of the stuff that happens with the military community is directly affected me in my life and my family. And so it's something I'm very plugged into. And so just to kind of try to separate that a little bit as much as possible from like divorcing adults, for example, I have just like a separate thing. And it's really like a hobby passion project, honestly, is what it is. I wrote this book called Veterans Affairs Whistleblower Retaliation. I used to work there at the VA years ago, like 10 years ago now it's been. But it really affected my life because there was like a whole, again, more legal stuff that kind of fell out with that. And I learned a lot about that whole federal screwed up civil service system that needs to be eliminated and how unjust that is. And learned about obviously whistleblower retaliation and just basically womanmilitaryveteran.com is a place for kind of these topics essentially. Where they're housed, where I put that information and stuff. And also, I think it's really important. I know it's really important for there to be representation around women in the military. And I certainly never thought I would be a part of the representations. I just want to get out of the military and be done with it. It was not a good experience for me. But, when I see, I've dealt with a lot of discrimination in North Carolina, worst state I've ever lived in, by the way. And I've lived in a lot of states, and a lot of just oppressive behavior. I've seen that online as well towards women and just statements about statements that I repeat about women's participation in the military versus men. So I just think it's really important for there to be a presence out there and for women to be represented in a professional positive light where they're taken just as seriously as men that have been and are affiliated with the military in some way. And I just don't really see that happening. So I know things are going to change over time. I know that the women military veteran population is the fastest growing veteran population right now. There's more women joining now and in the future in the military. And so I think that over time that will evolve. But yeah, I mean, it's really about kind of like representation, really, in general.
Awesome. So, so I guess going back towards like the whole business aspect of things, what would you
Mhm.
say was the biggest learning curve when starting your business?
Which one?
Any of them, I guess. Like, I mean, so one of the purposes of the VOB is to kind of help, because I feel like a lot of veterans,
Mhm.
we have that entrepreneur, like, I don't know, like, I guess with the things that we go through, we have that key sense of we know something can be done better, right? So a lot
Mhm.
of people do try to go out into the civilian sector, work for somebody else, and they just jump from job to job and they don't really realize like well, maybe they need to be in business for themselves. And they're not really sure, like they see, businesses like yours,
Mhm.
ones out there, and they're like, man, she must have just had it easy, which we all
Mhm.
know is not the case, right?
Yeah,
So,
no, not. I would just say my advice I would say to anyone kind of in the situation that you just described and something I wish I could have understood earlier, but I had like no business training and public school, so I went to it sucked when I was in grade school. Is to basically take a look at like what skills you have and what work you're doing and whether or not that can be converted into your own business. So, for example, this is just a random example, but like if you are able to be a plumber and you have plumbing skills, well, that most likely could be turned into a business, right? I mean, people need plumbers. And so, taking a look at your state regulations, because I know it's a fact that in the state that I'm in and other states I'm aware of, that's regulated. You have to get like a license for that and seeing what that would take and kind of working on that goal. Let's just say is the hypothetical getting a plumbing license while you're working at this job that you don't want to be at, just so you can kind of bridge and transition. And then thanks to the internet, it's very easy to find a company that will help you with forming a business entity or to do it on your own. It's fairly simple these days. You just have to look it up. It does take time, but you can do it. and just seeing what your state requirements are, like as a plumber, for example, what's required to form the entity. Do you have to form an entity, et cetera, insurances, et cetera, and kind of getting that off the ground and just, kind of starting with that and getting the building blocks set up legally, and then going from there and taking a look at like, the marketing, like a Google business listing, so that people can find you, and kind of just getting started with, all of that. And it takes time to like Google those things and look things up. But with AI, like ChatGPT and Google, it's easier than ever to kind of find the answers to the information you need and to kind of get started. But I would just say, looking at that, like I just mentioned, like the state regulations on the work you want to do and what skills you have that can transfer into business quickly, I think would be the first steps into transitioning out of a job that you hate into a business that you love and want to work in and can grow and build. One of the nice things about having your own business that people really don't talk about, and this is something I was listening to, this thing. I'm not gonna say the name of it, but anyways, it's this thing. It's online education. It's really good and stuff, and it focuses on a lot of basically wealthy people that are very successful. And one of them, more than one of them, well, more than one of them were like saying things like, "Oh, who needs work-life balance, and who needs a day off, and who needs, who cares if someone calls you Sunday? They should call you Sunday. Wouldn't you want that opportunity?" But it's like their lives look a lot different than like the person who's working at the W-2 job life. You know what I mean? Like, for example, this one person who's now, has a multi-billion dollar company, billionaire. The first half of every single day, 7 days a week, is them doing their exercise, their fitness, having their morning fresh juice, getting their hair and makeup done, um, doing their grooming regime and shower and moisturization, stuff like that. That's the first half of every single day. So it's like a pretty good day, right? Every single day. That is your work-life balance. That is your thing.
Yes.
And then the rest of their day, they have scheduled for their meetings and for their work stuff and all that. So my point I'm making here is that when you own your own business, this is something nobody really wants to talk about. These successful people, they just want to say, work hard, work hard, work hard. That's not true. Work smarter, not harder. Is that you have a lot more control of your schedule and what that's going to look like. And so you're less likely to burn out if you have more control over your schedule and are able to prioritize the things that make you healthier and happier every day. And so that's a real advantage of owning your own business potentially, if you can make that work. And I know for me, for example, I swear, I just like, this goes back to like the fact that like I moved around so much and, damn military, all this kind of stuff. But I was in these horrible jobs, doing the work that I do, of just being worked to the bone. This is very common in this industry, which is very ironic given the fact it was called mental health, wink, wink, nod, nod. And I mean, you just want to work you to the bone. I mean, for no money, it's just total insanity. And I was unaware that I could have started my own company right, pretty much right away. I had no idea. I had no idea the law that's allowed for that. I was like almost done with my licensing, which is why I was working these terrible jobs. Um, it's a very long story. Before I realized I had that option, and when I had the option, I was like floored. I was like, wait, why? How did I not know this? Like, why didn't we tell me this? Like, how could I not know this? And so I went from working for other people, like just I call them mental health sweatshops, to working for myself. And I finally got some sleep. That was nice. Being able to set my own schedule. And I was also able to accomplish my professional goals that fast. 6 months later, after opening my company, I finished the highest level of my license requirements like that. Because I was able to focus on it, I was able to prioritize it. I was able to do every single thing that needed to be done, which was a lot. I was able to do it. And when you work for other people, typically, in my experience, of course, it depends, everyone's different, right? My experience is the goals of the person in charge, people in charge, are going to be prioritized over anything that you want, for whatever your career or yourself or whatever you have in mind. And so you just have so much more control potentially. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything in life, and there's nothing perfect. But as far as what I've learned, kind of my biggest learning curve, your original question, I would say that started back in my early 20s. Because when I was in the military, I did a little event planning business. It wasn't anything formal. Wasn't I didn't even have formal structure, and I really knew nothing. I really knew nothing. But I'd formed relationships with people on the base, military spouses, and I would hold little events and stuff. And I learned about this was you have to keep in mind over 10 years ago. Okay. And so the internet was not what it is now. And so I learned how to build my very first website before website builders existed. Okay, think about that for a second. And I had to use this really complicated software, which blew the minds of even people who are in business to do this for a living. And it was really challenging. I spent so much time putting that website together, but it was a functional website for that day and age. People were really impressed with it. It really worked for the business stuff I was doing at the time. And that was the biggest learning curve, that and learning about kind of marketing. I was just beginning to learn about digital marketing. That was kind of just becoming a thing. Facebook was really the only social media at the time. We didn't have any of these others like we do now. Yeah, so that was probably the biggest learning curve. And then, I've learned by doing. I didn't go to Harvard Business School, that's for sure. But thanks to the Googlenator, the Google and the AI and all the internet stuff is much easier now than it was many moons ago. And I would say now with, like, for example, building a website, the hardest part is picking which website builder you're going to use, which website platform,
Yeah,
not if you're going
right.
to have a website. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it's just there's a lot of options. And so it's not nothing's easy or perfect, and there's tons of cons with different things of trying to have a business. But I definitely think that if it's something that you want to do, it's worth exploring.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So especially with your move coming up, where do you see divorcing adults? Like, where do you see this
Mhm,
go? Where would you like to see it go here in the next
mhm.
year, years?
Yeah, so basically, as long as you have a license to practice in the work that I do, you're allowed to practice in whatever state you want to practice in. I mean, of course, there's legalities to that, which you could go on forever. That's like a whole other thing. But the main thing is that you have a license to practice in the state you're practicing in. So that will not change. I completely practice 100% online. And so that will not change, right? Um, and so the other state, I'm going to have to just look into, which I already have a little bit, into possibly getting licensed and looking at different pathways of possibly doing it and seeing, what will be involved. And if I want to do it, I don't know. We'll see what happens. And if I do at that point, there's just a lot of paperwork and government regulation in this. So, like, once you get the license, then you have to basically, I mean, I'm talking about the legalities. Again, this is not legal advice. I've not been to law school. If you need professional help, go find it. Thank you. But my understanding is I have gotten some professional information is that, I'd have to form some kind of corporate entity out there to practice under after I get my license, and then kind of you start up, the other things that you need along with that, with marketing or, infrastructure with like an office or whatever you may need. And I would like to do like a hybrid model, which I did when I first started out here in North Carolina. I did do a hybrid thing where I saw people in person and online, kind of a combo. Some people were completely online, some people were completely in person, some people were both. It was really flexible. And that was before 2020 happened and before this became normalized. Because I remember when I started doing it, I feel like an old person again. When back in my day, when I started doing it, people, I mean, like, I'm going to say some of the comments I had some of my peers tell me. Like, they made it seem like like, just in different universe for thinking about doing anything online. Like, what? Like, not doing 100% everything in person. What? And there's even for clinical supervision, I'm way past that, thank God. But even now, I mean, there's still stigma attached to doing that remotely and online, which just blows my mind, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, I would like to go back to kind of like a hybrid model way in the future, in the state that I'm going to be living in, and then do online in both the states. So that's kind of the long term thing. If I think about it all at once, it does feel so overwhelming that, like, I just have to block it from my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah, you got a couple, you gotta move first, right? You can kind of do some of the research.
Well, it's just I have to take it's just like everything. You have to take everything literally a step at a time. Because if
Yeah.
you do a little bit at a time, a little bit day by day, you can get a ton done. But with God, if you try to think about the whole thing, it just like might just collapse. I don't know. It's just like it's just a lot. It's so much.
And things always tend to pop up that, you have a plan, something will pop up and you're like, oh, back to the drawing board. Got to solve.
Yeah. And that is the truth.
So, how can our fellow veterans best support you?
Um, I'm not asking for any support, basically. I mean, if you want to learn more about the work that I do, I have two websites, divorcingadults.com. That's my social work line. And then womanmilitaryveteran.com would probably be more of interest for the military community, military community related topics. And then on social media, I'm very active. Probably my most active platform would be LinkedIn. So if
Okay.
you're on there, easy to find me there. But I'm all over the whole social media sphere to some extent, not every single platform. I used to be, that was a bit much.
That is a
Scaled
lot.
back slightly. Yeah.
It's not like you can use the same thing over and over again, Twitter or X or whatever it is now with their limited, characters. And what's the other one? That one that Instagram, ugh, I don't, Thread.
Threads.
Yeah.
I'm not on Threads and I'm not on Twitter, now known as X. If you have a social media scheduler, you can repurpose your stuff and that will help you. Like if you have a good one, kind of adjust like your characters and your frames of your pictures and make sure everything lines up on all the platforms. So it can be done. I do it to some extent to keep everything matchy.
Awesome. Well, that is all the questions that I have for you today. Hope we can connect back after you're at your next location and kind of see where you're at then if you're interested in that.
No, that sounds good. That will be a while from now, so don't even anticipate anything sooner than for a year or two from now, I would say, because it would take a while. I'd probably say closer to like 2 years to be completely like settled.
No, that makes sense. It
Be a
is
while.
regardless if I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. You could have the best thing out there, but when you move, there's just something like you always have to kind of start over. So like, whether you're, a photographer and you have the best photos around and you have a great following and you move somewhere else completely different, then you're kind of somewhat starting from ground zero trying to find those clients. So,
So for me, I don't feel that way because mine's already on the line already.
yeah.
So really nothing would really change. I mean, there's gonna be behind the scenes changes, but that wouldn't be something that, someone will like notice up front
Okay.
or whatever.
Well,
So
the last thing I'm going to ask you, I know it's not really a pitch, but do you
Mhm.
want to do a last minute recap on what you have to offer?
So I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state of North Carolina, and I offer essentially divorce counseling services for people going through transition that can be found at divorcingadults.com. And I'm also an author, and my latest book is Veterans Affairs, Whistleblower Retaliation, and you can learn more about that and military community related topics at womanmilitaryveteran.com.